Okay, next up on our logical framework approach to capacity building for resilience is situation analysis. Sorry, so let me bring up the PowerPoint and the pointer. The third step of the logical framework approach is the situation analysis and entails the identification and analysis of the challenges to be addressed by the capacity development program or project. Such analysis is a fundamental requisite for any capacity development initiative, since it's simply not possible to define the goal, purpose, results, and activities to be planned to reach a preferred situation that you defined without first describing the current situation that the project or program is intended to tackle. So it's often called baseline in ecological studies, where people keep talking about species going extinct or changing in abundance in latitudinal distribution, altitudinal distribution, and so on. Too often we don't have an exact baseline established, lack of data, lack of long-term observations, and so on. So that baseline or the current situation needs to be well understood and determined to be something that has to be changed because it's not sustainable, it's not resilient enough, and so on. In other words, we must describe what the problems are in the current situation as well as their causes and effects. This is also the focus of more recent processes of capacity assessment, but the challenge is still to translate such approaches to the specific context of capacity development for resilience, and I think the logical framework approach offers a more thorough methodology for that. So you know what you are building on and what you are trying to solve by establishing the current situation completely in terms of the problems and the lack of capacity. The definition of resilience presented in chapter 5 can be used to guide this analysis. The first part states that resilience is the capacity of a human environment system to continuously develop along a preferred expected trajectory while remaining within human and environmental boundaries. Remember, we put the Human Development Index floor and environmental footprint boundary beyond which we didn't want to go and below which we didn't want to drop. This means that we must identify and analyze potential deviations from this preferred expected scenario, which are referred to as risk scenarios. In short, we must analyze risk to grasp what the human environment system should be resilient against. Then the second part of the definition states that the resilience is an emergent property determined by the ability of the human environment system itself to anticipate, recognize, adapt to, and learn from variations, changes, disturbances, disruptions, and disasters that may cause harm to what human beings value. So here we are bringing in the hazards. It could be climate hazards, but remember we also talked about earthquakes and volcanoes and so on. In other words, we must also analyze the current capacity of the human environment system to perform these 4 overall functions and their constituent functions as presented in chapter 6. So please go back and look those up, but here there are many available methodologies for analyzing risk and project team. I have to read it carefully. There are many available methodologies for analyzing risk, and the project team is obviously free to choose any methodology they consider adequate. However, there are some methodologies that are more appropriate than others for analyzing risk for sustainable development. There are financial risks, there are risks to specific sectors like real estate or coastal communities or agriculture and so on. But when you think about risk for sustainable development, there are some methods that are more suitable. Drawing on the second part of this book, a sustainability science approach to analyzing risk entails at least 6 features. It must be able to integrate phenomena on various spatial and temporal scales, as well as structural and functional complexity. So those are systemic complexities that we talked about before. Accommodate different values, so it has to be a multi-value analysis where people's we talked about the example of a pasture being looked at by a grazing person, a farmer, and a real estate developer, ecologist, and so on and so forth. Incorporate a wide range of hazards that may impact what is valuable and important to protect, so it has to be a multi-hazard framework. Integrate a multitude of factors and processes contributing to the vulnerability of what is valuable to the impact of the hazards, so it has to be multi-vulnerability approach. Involve various actors across functional, administrative, and geographical borders, so it has to be a multi-actor analysis. Integrate several risk analyses performed by different groups of actors, so it has to be a multi-analysis. Furthermore, remembering the essence of managing risk for sustainable development presented in Chapter 5, analyzing risk is about structuring risk scenarios and comparing them with the preferred expected scenario. We want to go somewhere and we have the preferred state, so we have to understand what risk we are leaving behind and what risk we are going to own up to. This makes a risk analysis into the answer to 3 questions. What can happen, how likely is it to happen, and if it happens, what are the consequences? Fully acknowledging that there are uncertainties involved in answering all 3 of them, we must remember also that these risks evolve, especially since climate is warming, things are changing, sea level is rising, humidity is increasing, extreme events, heat waves, and so on. So the risks are not stationary by any means. However, answering the questions entails a systematic analysis of what human beings value, which is a normative question often, the events that can have a negative impact on that, how vulnerable they are to the impact of these events, and what capacity we have to protect these values. With a clear picture of what risk scenarios that could cause the human environment system to deviate away from its preferred expected development trajectory, it is time to analyze capacities contributing to its resilience in relation to the risk scenarios. Remembering the operationalization of resilience in Chapter 6, the 4 overall functions of anticipation, recognition, adaptation, and learning can be decomposed into more detailed constituent functions that can be further decomposed if necessary. However, it's important to note that it is the form of the human environment system that performs the functions, and it is this form that we can identify and analyze. Analyzing capacity for resilience is, in other words, about analyzing what is available in terms of knowledge, skills, tools, and other resources, organization at all levels, rules, regulations, and other formal institutions, and norms, values, and other informal institutions to perform each function. This includes also analyzing how the output from one function contributes as input to other functions. So they're often called input-output processes. Finance is not explicitly mentioned here, but tools and other resources must include finance, because all these tend to remain very unfinished or unaccomplished or planned and not even started because of financial constraint. Remember, this has to go beyond coping with hazards at the present and build resilience for the future. So you have to mainstream these processes and have budget for them and have room in your budget for continued actions once you decide that the current risk is not tenable, current situation has to move towards a preferred scenario, the preferred situation. Okay, so the situation analysis in this context is not only divided into a risk analysis and a capacity analysis, but can also be seen as having 2 phases. The first phase is a descriptive analytical phase intended to collect a wide range of data, while the second phase is a mobilizing concluding phase intended to sum up the results of the situation analysis to one mutually agreed upon picture of the current challenges for the resilience of the targeted human environment system. It could be irrigation, it could be energy, it could be health, it could be a city and its resilience, it could be many things. They all qualify as the human environment system that is under consideration for capacity building for resilience. There are many ways to do this. The analytical phase may include documentary sources, interviews, focus groups, observations, mapping, etc. And it has been suggested that a series of workshops and meetings on different administrative levels might be appropriate, especially since actors on different administrative levels may describe their human environment system differently. So this is something we talked about in terms of the perception. So if you are not all on the same page as to what the system is that you are dealing with, then you cannot be sure that everybody sees the risks as the same, or the preferred state being aspired for may not be the same, because the values have to be agreed upon as well. Okay, so the output of the analytical phase is a holistic and systematic overview of the challenges to be used as a basis for prioritizing key challenges or focal problems to address in the forthcoming capacity development project or program. You want to keep this output of the analytical phase in mind. To do such prioritization as well as to mobilize commitment for the initiative, it's central that the involved actors share some common views on the challenges at hand and the potential project or program addressing them. This can be facilitated in a goal-oriented project planning workshop, in which the concluding part of the situation analysis constitutes the first part, and parts of the objectives analysis presented below constitute the second part. Okay, so let's read the next part. These workshops for stakeholders, let's say, are also commonly referred to as logical framework approach workshops, but I choose deliberately to call them goal-oriented project planning workshops to set them apart from all other workshops used in various steps of the logical framework approach. Goal-oriented project planning workshops vary from their simplest form with a brief meeting with colleagues if the initiative focus is on one specific department, to a full multi-day workshop if the project or program is much more complex. Obviously that's a logistical detail that can be obviously depends on many things. The result of this part of the goal-oriented project planning workshop is often referred to as a problem tree, which is a visual representation of how causes, problems and effects are linked to each other, as we'll see in a minute. However, a problem tree is likely to be full of links with other linear relationships between a particular cause, problem and its effects. This means that one particular effect of a specific problem might be the cause of another problem, which in turn has an effect that is the cause of a third problem, etc. Including such dependencies in the situation analysis is crucial, because otherwise you will have cascading effects that you didn't plan for. So implementing a set of activities is futile if the intended result also is dependent on other activities not included in the project. So project has to completely address internal factors and external factors that affect the successful implementation of the project or the program. The main questions that the situation analysis intends to answer are summarized in box 9.4. So here is the problem tree. You have focal problem 1 with cause and effect, and it is a cause for problem 2, and also has effect and cause related to focal problem 2, which itself has its own effects and causes as well, and then it will probably have links to another problem. So the problem tree has to be completely understood so that the risk transfers or risk dependencies and interdependencies, whether they are logical, physical and so on, must be understood, right? So the summary of situation analysis then. The situation analysis can be summarized as the answer to 4 questions. What can happen? What is likely or how likely is it to happen? If it happens, what are the consequences? what is the available knowledge, skill, tool, and other resources and organization on all levels, rules and regulations and other formal institutions that are available, and norms, values, and other informal institutions to perform the functions contributing to resilience. So this is the situational analysis of the logical framework, and these questions always have to be kept in mind as being answered when the situational analysis is complete, so that you have a full handle on the current situation and well mapped preferred situation is also ready for designing the program or the project. Okay, so we'll come back and look at the objectives analysis. Remember, the first three were in terms of understanding the current situation. This objectives analysis is defining the preferred situation, and then come the projects and programs. Okay, so this chapter, as I said, is very, very long, so we will have probably over 20 podcasts, and each one of them I'm trying to make self-contained, so it'll take as many podcasts as it will take, so let's not worry about the number of podcasts. Okay.